on supporting districts in embedding the 4Cs, so communication and collaboration, creativity and critical thinking through Microsoft Teams and OneNote and Flipgrid and all things Microsoft. So we work with small and large districts across the country, providing professional development, and we try to customize what we do to support their use of Microsoft tools to meet the needs of students that they serve. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Samant?
Hi, I'm Samant. I'm the GM of the Enterprise and Education Division at Edmodo, and I help oversee a lot of the countrywide, statewide, and district-wide deployments of Edmodo. Edmodo is a communication and collaboration platform for parents, students, and teachers to connect and collaborate. And we've been around for over 10 years, and it's been used by over 144 million learners around the world. And just specifically, we've really catered and updated our platform to meet the needs of distance learning as we look into back to school 2020. So looking forward to having a conversation today.
Thank you. Miriam?
Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam. I'm over here from GoGuardian. So some of you have probably heard of us or may already use us out there, but what we do is we actually give schools the power to facilitate and have distance learning, especially right now during the unprecedented times we're in. So we have 3 key flagship products that you will know us for. One is GoGuardian Admin, which is the actual filtering piece. You're sending a ton of devices home with students right now, but how do you make sure you keep explicit content away and keep them still age appropriate and safe? So you don't want to just give keys to the internet out to students without making sure that you're keeping it filtered and safe. So we provide that for admin. We also have GoGuardian Teacher, which is huge right now because we are making sure that teachers actually have a way to engage with their students. So we have teachers doing video conferencing. That's one of the newest features we added in there. They can have video calls with students, and oftentimes just having that facial familiarity is a really key piece of the puzzle, especially when we're all remote and out of our normal elements. So having that sense of having a distant classroom is huge. And then lastly, we have something called GoGuardian Beacon, which is actually there for mental health and student safety. And we're making sure that students are, being monitored for potential cases of suicide or self-harm. So that's what GoGuardian is, and I'm excited to be able to join these experts up here and be able to talk about the evolving nature of schools.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Joe?
Hello. Can everyone hear me now? Sorry,
Yep.
Wasn't holding down the one key. So I'm Joe from Whatcom. Whatcom's been around for a long time. My short history is I actually went to school to be a teacher, but through a long and circuitous path, ended up going through kind of the media and entertainment space and found my way to Whatcom about 20 years ago. A lot of people don't realize Whatcom's been around for almost 40 years, catering to, the creative industries. Those who are familiar with Whatcom know that, the creative industries are using our tablets and have been for a long time. But in education space, Promethean and even smartboards back in the day were also using Whatcom technology as their pen-based input. So, Whatcom's been giving those tools to teachers, in the classroom. And so obviously the big topic today is going to be about the remote learning aspects. And for those of you who are familiar with like Khan Academy, they're a great example of how one might use our products in the creative or education space for distance learning. And so long story short, I'm here to talk from the hardware side about how we can collaborate and interact with our customers and our students more efficiently.
Thank you, Joe. Irene?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. It's good to be here with you. And I love this platform. So my name is Irene Spiro, and I am with the CEO of Next Chapter Consulting, a consulting firm that was formed about a year ago. Prior to that, I worked for COSIN for 15 years, where I was the chief strategy officer working with school districts, working with companies, forming partnerships, and dealing with collaborative communications. Since founding Next Chapter, I've been working to secure and continue those great partnerships between the private and public sector, and most recently have been concentrating a lot on this shift to virtual conferences as a result of the pandemic. So this is my first experience in presenting in a virtual conference, and I'm looking forward to doing it again soon. So thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you so much, everyone. During the course of the conversation, if you guys have any questions, please enter them in the chat box down below, and we will address those questions towards the end. And with that, we'll get started. One very important topic coming up over and over is how do we keep students safe, our teachers safe, and what tools do we have to monitor the mental and social, emotional impacts that faces everyone with distance learning? And can we also elaborate on why social emotional tools are so essential for everyone? Miriam, would you like to start with you?
Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hello again. This would be, as I briefly touched on, we have GoGuardian Beacon. So Beacon is there to really address the fact that students are home now and they actually aren't on campus where you have your counselors in place. And there is something to say about counselors being able to actually meet with students, walk around the campus and be able to say, hey, like, how are you doing? What's going on? So missing that piece. And then one of the unintended parts of being remote right now, being in quarantine, keeping students apart, they're lacking that the social need of meeting with friends, getting to socialize, just seeing your teachers in person. So all of that has this unintended consequence of a really big increase in mental health issues, anxiety, depression. Oftentimes it's really unfortunate, but there are situations where student homes are actually not safe. So now they're at home with the people that aren't as healthy or safe for them. So there's just a myriad of tons of different kinds of issues that are happening. So what becomes important is having something like Beacon, what we've created, where it's designed for counselors. And what this means is it uses special AI we have. So our AI, our engineers built out a software. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not well spoken in how it works, but what it does is it actively scans all the documents, the pages, the browsing activity that students have, and ensure that there aren't situations where students are actually typing a suicide note or writing about harming themselves on their social media pages. It's having this active eye to catch these situations and not just find them, but actually pass the information along, because there are so many cases where students need help and they now no longer have a way to ask for it. So counselors will receive alerts and be able to engage. And this is just one example of a way that we're trying to help out with schools, because again, action is huge. Right now, students are just having a slew of new experiences, new emotions coming up, new sets of challenges, these emotional challenges. And if students don't receive the help that was normally there on campuses, there could be really bad unintended consequences as time goes on. I think it's becoming more clear that even if schools do go back, there's a huge chance that bless you, whoever that was, there's a huge chance that they're going to have to go back to a remote environment. So if this constant back and forth, we want to make sure that no students are left behind. And when I say we, it's not just GoGuardian. I think it's just as a general rule of thumb right now in education. Yes, we need to physically keep students safe from any virus exposure. However, there's also how do we keep students mentally healthy? So these are just a two-pronged approach that we're definitely doing our best. And I know there's a lot of different leaders who are trying to answer the same question. How do we mentally protect students?
No, excellent. Anybody else want to elaborate on the social emotional aspects and tools that you've seen out there as well?
Yeah, I can jump in. This is Simon here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Something that we've been seeing at Edmodo from the social and emotional side is, Edmodo is traditionally used among teachers and students, teachers and parents, and in some cases even teachers and teachers to kind of communicate and share resources. Something that we've been seeing, which is really interesting, is teachers are starting to mimic kind of real world classroom behavior on Edmodo. So where they're setting up groups where it's not about assignments, it's not about submitting homework. It's just to hang out. So it's a safe space where kids could just talk, hang out, share links, share memes, share kind of funny gifs. It's just an interesting way how they've taken that real world experience and transferred it online, because kids do still want to hang out with their buddies, their friends. They still want to talk about stuff. So it's interesting how they're using certain tools in a way that's, okay, how could I replicate similar behavior that I see in my regular classroom, but in like a digital setting. So, I think there's also that element of, students do want to interact with each other in just a general social way that doesn't always relate to submitting homework or classwork.
No, excellent. Thank you, Sumat. With students now viewing classes on a screen and not in the classroom, the teachers lose a very common tool that they typically would use every day and might be overlooked. And that would be the whiteboard. Joe, can you tell us what tools do these teachers have that can help them overcome this problem?
Absolutely. I mean, so there's, depending on the software or the environments you guys are working in as educators, there's a wealth of, whiteboard-like applications, but I'm not sure if you've all had the opportunity to try and use a whiteboard with a mouse. It's kind of like writing your name with a brick. So, Whatcom's been, as I said, the leader in pen input for nearly 40 years. And what it does, and why, for instance, like Khan Academy works so well, is it gives you an organic interface to the computer that looks and feels genuinely like handwriting. So it's that organic kind of connection. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize our name, Wacom, literally translates, or it's kind of a nomiker that evolves out of wa, which is Japanese kanji for harmony, and com with computers. It's all about kind of connecting with a computer and taking technology as much out of the way. And that same thing is absolutely critical with trying to help, youth and teachers alike communicate with one another. A picture paints 1,000 words, and, all words started as pictures to begin with, for instance. And our tools actually allow you to engage regardless of the software, whether you're sharing screen and using a drawing app or using the whiteboard feature in Microsoft. Allows you to engage at an organic level and draw, communicate, be silly, or, teach math, teach process, teach whatever. Another thing that's really missing, and not to dwell on art because Wacom's lived there for a long time, but we're starting to see STEAM rather than STEM. Art's becoming part of our dialogue, and it's becoming absolutely critical even in the global and business sense. It's those people who can communicate visually who end up dominating a lot of the boardroom meetings, a lot of the discussions, and that same sort of skill set needs to be fostered. So yeah, whiteboarding is absolutely essential, and both sides of the equation can do it. Microsoft Whiteboard actually lets multiple people engage on a massive whiteboard together. It's something I encourage everybody to play with, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I would love to share that I think that the opportunity to provide an environment where students and faculty can collaborate is vital during these times that are so different right now. I definitely think that being able to mimic what is as close to what kids and staff used to consider normal would be a key priority for any school district. Finding ways to use the tools that teachers have, and a lot of times they don't even know that they exist within the technology that they have, and being able to really strategically play on that collaboration and communication. And it goes back to the social and emotional connections that we were talking about earlier as well.
You nailed it. Yeah, it's the connection point, right? And the closer we can get to reestablishing normal, it gives you that ability to connect and engage at that level. And like I said, we've been around forever, and like as you pointed out, the tools have been there, and a lot of people just have struggle with finding them. I encourage people to come by the Wacom booth. It's in there, and we have people that can show you where these tools are or how to get to them. By all means, just come and talk to us.
Well, excellent. Thank you, guys. We are talking about new ways to collaborate and connect. Sumant, I'd like to start with you. What is the importance of an education community online for teachers, students, and parents? What do we have out there that can solve this gap?
Hi, Brent. I would say, pre-remote, pre-COVID, Edmodo was primarily used in the teacher-student capacity. And what we've seen, because Edmodo is almost like a private Facebook, it's a private learning community, is kind of the phrase that we've dubbed. So it's a space that not only allows for teacher-to-student interaction. We're seeing, for example, we work with the state of Vermont, where Edmodo is primarily used for teachers across the state to interact with each other, share resources, share even stories as to what's working, what's not working. Similarly, on Edmodo, we also have the ability for parents to have their own groups. So parents of a class, if you need help on, hey, how are you teaching? How are you kind of coping with this? So what we're seeing is that while the primary use case for a tool like Edmodo or any of these kind of social collaboration tools started out pre-remote learning as just teacher to student, you're seeing these side kind of networks forming, whether it's all teachers. I mean, we even have groups that are just administrators, for example, just in one group sharing, best practices, best tools, what's working, what hardware devices are you using. So I think, just like the real world, you're seeing this, digital, these kind of in-person communities form digitally. And in some cases that go beyond just a specific school or district. It's actually going either national or statewide, where everyone's coming together again in this private learning community is how we've dubbed the phase.
No, excellent. Even now, students learn even more from each other. Students learn even more when they learn from each other and teach each other. What tools do we have to incorporate peer teaching strategies through distance learning? And can you guys explain why these strategies are still so important?
So one of the things that we share in our professional development for teachers in schools is that we allow students to collaborate in the classroom, and a lot of our Microsoft tools allow them to also collaborate virtually. So when you're talking about using whiteboarding for brainstorming, or higher level students might be using a OneNote notebook where they're collaborating on a presentation that they're going to prepare. I think it really plays into them being able to collaborate and work together, which is how we sort of have kids learn from one another in the classroom setting. So allowing them to continue with that same process of working in small groups virtually becomes vital in the teaching and learning from one another.
Yeah. Well said, actually. Sorry, I was just going to pipe in because you hit on a topic that's kind of sensitive to me. I've got a boy who's in beginning of high school right now, and he's struggling with a lot of these same things. And when you can actually engage with your friends with a multitude of tools, we've all had those emails at work, right, that just kind of had the wrong tone. It's the ability to actually, get on and talk with voice, where you can actually hear the emotions or see the facial expressions. It makes all the difference in the world. And it's all of these tools combined that kind of get us closest to that new normal. And I love this group and where we're all going with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Joe. We've heard some great solutions on how we can help teachers and students with distance learning, but how do we get educators to use these tools effectively? Now, how do we make the new normal normal?
Yeah, so I think that, it is definitely a priority right off the bat to make sure that our students and our staff have the tools to use. But, like you said, we need to make sure that we're helping them understand how to do that. And professional development is a great way to support districts in the tools that they have. Oftentimes they don't even know the multitude of resources that are right there in front of them. When we talk with staff and share some of the access they have to Immersive Reader or the Translator, Picture Dictionary, all of those resources within the Microsoft Office 365 education tools, a lot of times they don't realize those exist. And so really helping teachers and staff understand that even in a remote setting that is now the remote normal for us, you can still provide interventions. You can still provide individualized attention to your students by giving that support. I think the other part of our new normal relates to our staff and how are they going to plan lessons if they're having PLC meetings in a classroom on site. What does that look like when they're remote? And I think helping them to understand the collaboration opportunity that exists. So again, being able to share and show with staff, you can use Teams as a collaboration. You can use all of those tools for brainstorming and coming up with the lessons. You can host virtual field trips. I think that really is just how we need to support our teachers and administrators in moving towards a virtual normal.
Brandon, can I add in some thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Perfect, thanks. So I actually, professional development is a really key thing. So I totally agree. And kind of jumping off of that, I think one of the things that we focus on at GoGuardian, teachers already have literally so many pieces of their job. Like they already have to manage their curriculums, teach. Now adding on this whole additional dynamic of having software and tools to use on their computers at home. So I think one of the key things that we try to be very mindful, and I know in general, something that's just great as we develop more products, any company, is just keeping in mind to have solutions that are simple. So that's something I think that would really be helpful for us. We try to keep everything as turnkey as we can. We make it so that in literally as fast as 15 minutes, administrators can get GoGuardian set up, push out to all devices, and have teachers up and running. So having a myriad of support videos and tools and just making sure that it's easy for everyone to get trained up. I do think there's going to be an element of mindfulness as engineers are developing products and building out different functionality. So I know that's something that we do strive to do at GoGuardian. We offered, the additional training for it as well, but just from the beginning, making products that are easy for teachers to use, easy for counselors, easy for administrators. So the more accessible the actual technology is, I think more teachers, more students, and more administrators will all benefit from that.
Actually, I'd like to just
Yeah,
add
well
to that.
said.
I think I speak on behalf of probably everyone up here. This is an opportunity for all of you to engage with each of these companies, including Wacom. We have a great community that has a lot of information out there, but also it's a place where you can go to ask the questions, right? If you have the questions, there's probably 1,000 people just like you asking the same questions. And that means it's time for us to provide those answers. If you can't find them, make them more readily available, or we can point you to the answers that we already have up there. And I'd love to see more collaboration with all of us working together as well. So I would invite everybody up here to engage with Wacom's community as well. So thank you guys.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Joe. I wanted to turn towards equity gap. We all know there's an equity gap facing us. This can be students not given a device. This can be students who have connectivity issues. And Miriam touched on it a little bit before. We can't afford to leave students behind. Irene, I was wondering if you could share some solutions you might have heard or how we might be able to close this gap in the future.
Thank you, Brandon. This is one of the most serious issues we face currently in education. We all know that we're going more and more to the remote and virtual learning space for the near future. And in fact, as you said, there are many students who are left behind because they do not have a device or they do not have internet connection in their homes. So how do we solve that problem?
Andres?
Really requires the collective goodwill and commitment of the public and private sectors. And
Andres,
there are
vamos
good
al go-to.
examples along the way. One example occurred in New York City public schools when they went remote last spring. They worked with some providers to give all students web-enabled devices to take into their home. Another school district, Binghamton School District in New York, recognized the fact that students often are at home with parents who are unfamiliar with the device and how to use web-enabled tools. So they set up virtual cafes to train parents and to help them assist their students. There are so many examples across the country of how this is being done. Another one has to do with the fact that some school districts, for example, Austin Unified School District in Texas, took their web-enabled buses and parked them in areas of high need so that students could actually tap into that device while they were at home and get the web-enabled resources. So it's happening in a number of places, probably not enough, and we're still leaving many students behind. One point that I just want to bring to your attention is that Congress is now considering its fifth emergency spending bill that will include major funding to enable broadband access and to expand that to schools more widely and hopefully close that equity gap.
No, excellent. Any other panels have any back here?
Just let me just kind of connect it back to what everybody's been saying. So we heard from Edmodo and we heard from GoGuardian and from Wapamoco, and they all have incredible solutions for us to work with in this new environment. But it's not, unless the students have access to a device, unless they have access to internet, and unless they have access to a teacher or a parent at home who is able to aid them in this journey, they're left behind.
Yeah.
I think that's all really spot on. And I do want to add, I think from my own experiences, I've seen situations where school districts are, there's always one other piece of the puzzle. They may have access to devices, but there is no Wi-Fi. There are communities where not every home has Wi-Fi in the house. So I do think it's important as educational leaders, we need to always take the time to think about, all right, it's great if I can provide the device, but is this device is it safe? Is it being filtered? Are we monitoring, student behaviors? Are we making sure that everyone's safe? There's even situations where schools are actually putting Wi-Fi hotspots so that students can come in cars, sit there and do work. So I think it's important as a community, we do get innovative, and these really simple issues that are such as just having access to good Wi-Fi. That's a staple of being able to do remote learning. So if that's not available, then I think it's important that we put the time and effort to figure out creative solutions as to how we can actually push Wi-Fi out. How can we make sure that devices are safe, and so on and so forth.
brilliant. Speaking in terms of devices, a lot of those who have looked into Wacom, they've frequently seen our creative devices, which are, I'll be honest, they aren't on the inexpensive side, but we've seen whole school districts actually set up their teachers with, a myriad of different devices. And we have some very cost effective that have been distributed even at some levels to students who need to have some collaboration tools. They are out there, and fortunately, we're seeing the funding finally being spent on kind of stabilizing and equalizing the environment for all the students and teachers.
No, that's a great point. And, Cindy, we talked about this a little bit on the side. We talked about the equity gap, but then we also talked about, the achievement gap as well. I was wondering if you could just touch on the achievement gap there and talk to everyone about your experiences there.
Sure. The achievement gaps have been around since probably the 60s, when they started researching the achievement levels between different groups of students. Oftentimes it's determined by standardized testing, dropout rates, courses students are choosing or enrolled in. And when schools look at these gaps, they need to consider race and language and disability, and oftentimes they'll even consider gender. I can remember being a third grade teacher and saying, I don't understand why my math scores are so much higher for the boys and my reading scores were so much higher for the girls. And oftentimes what we realized was it came back to our instruction and what we were doing and how we were teaching children. And so I think that there are lots of things that we can do, and we can help schools and teachers support closing the achievement gap. We spend a lot of time in our professional development talking about what we always say is leveling the playing field. So we try to provide teachers with the tools for that communication and collaboration, and really making certain that we're engaging families in the process as well. I think it is also extremely valuable to note that what we provide not only encourages that ability to be successful, but when we know that we have language barriers, using the tools that we have to take that barrier away doesn't just have a positive impact on the student, it has a positive impact on the family. And so when we provide support to our families in that way as well, the same thing with things like the immersive reader and the picture dictionary. When we're trying to teach for content and we're not teaching reading, several teachers across the country will tell you how difficult it is to accept a student's achievement score if they're being tested in science, but they have to read the test, and therefore we're not really testing their content. So finding ways to help teachers, and this is supportive whether it's remote or whether it's blended, or if it's face-to-face instruction. These are all tools that can help close the achievement gap and the equity gap if we are consistent in supporting our teachers in effectively using these tools.
And what Cindy has said is so important in terms of closing that achievement gap, working with the teachers and also working with the parents and caregivers in a child's home, because in this new environment, they are often supplementing and working along with the teachers, and they need the tools to help their children as well.
No, excellent. No, thank you guys so much for that. So I'm actually on our last question here for the group. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we will address them towards at the end of this last question here. So I wanted to focus a bit on students and their communication and collaboration with students. Or with teachers, I'm sorry. How can students collaborate with teachers while distance learning? And also, what are some best practices school districts should be considering for students and their needs? Joe, I was thinking about starting off with you on this one.
Thank you. No, I think we've all been talking about the tools, and those tools are both software, they're hardware. Making sure at least the teachers have the ability to communicate through as close to the new normal as they can. I don't need to dive into Wacom specific stuff, but pen input, all of the tools, making sure that their mics are geared up, if they're engaging in webcam conversations, trying to make these students just feel as close to normal as possible. Their lives have been tossed, high into the wind, and it's our job to kind of help them, gravitate towards something that feels remotely normal. And so it really at the outset, we need to make sure that the teachers are armed to make them comfortable, and then if possible, that the students have the ability to engage in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with what he just shared. I think being able to, no matter what the tool, no matter what the platform, continue to engage students in small group, large group, whole group activities virtually, and use the resources and tools that are available to differentiate. So if you normally would sit with 3 or 4 kids in a reading lesson, then sit with those 3 or 4 kids virtually. I think keeping those connections strong are valuable, and they'll go a long way in this remote normal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I go back to the Khan Academy just real quickly. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like Khan Academy, people gravitate towards that because it feels organic, even though they're consuming it digitally. That ability to communicate in anything that looks and feels like what they're used to seeing really kind of bridges that gap that technology usually puts in the way. So, whatever that tool is, whether it's Wacom or otherwise, it's got to be kind of integrated at the teacher level first.
I completely agree with you, Joe. And I do think starting at the teacher level is the most important. Oftentimes we know admin is behind the scenes, but the actual students, their main point of entry are teachers. So ensuring the teachers have the top resources is super important. Even putting, I know for us at Go Guardian, like we've had our teacher product around for years. But one of the newest challenges we noticed, all right, all the teachers are trying to incorporate using Zoom videos or Zoom conferencing and using Google Hangouts to just be able to show their face to the class. So that's where, starting to think in the headspace of, all right, if this is the new normal, how do we actually make teacher even more accessible for teachers? Well, easy. We added video functionality right there into the dashboard portal. So I think it's just key to keep for not just Go Guardian, for all products, again, it's just like, how are we adapting this? And it's perfectly said by Joe for teacher forward thinking here. So how do we make sure teachers are good? Even having something as simple as a chat box, we have a chat functionality. So if a student needs to raise their hand, obviously a teacher can't see it, but they can actually chat a one-way, chat with a teacher to say, hey, I have a question. Can we clarify and review this topic we're going over? So it's just these small, minor, thoughtful touches that can really make a huge difference in the student learning experience at this point.
I know I talk too much.
I think, Miriam, it's also a question of having teachers feel comfortable with the technology. In many cases, they don't, and it takes them some time to do so. So all the professional training that is that Cindy talked about, that we all have talked about, is really essential so that they can feel comfortable and help students.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I really like about this panel up here. At the end of the day, we want all of our products work together to create a comprehensive solution for schools. There isn't just one piece of it. So I like everyone's come together to make education better. And I think that's what's really special about this whole conference, just all of us being here. And I just feel honored to be here working with everyone.
Yeah.
Well said.
And just one last point I wanted to just touch upon, while we kind of move to questions, is something that, we've been seeing, and again, given that we all live in the world of data and analytics, something that's really come to light, which maybe wasn't as kind of important before, but when you talk about equity and access, is, we're seeing a lot of administrators, school staff wanting to have access to deep analytics and insights as to who's, how much are students engaging, what's actually happening, because again, not everyone is engaging equally, and while you don't have access to them remotely, some way to use data to inform them, to have an outreach program, to make sure access is available. So that's something that I think going into this kind of back to school year, just having any kind of visibility and insights into the data will be, tremendously helpful in informing, okay, how can we be proactive in helping out specific students or helping out specific teachers as they kind of move into the digital environment.
Unmute there. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I mean, you guys brought up some great points of discussion here, and I think really insightful information for everyone. I hope everyone will be able to take back with them. And so at this time, I'm going to go to the questions that we had. One of them was fundings always tend to be an issue with schools and community-based programs. What funding is available for them?
So that's a great question, and I think there are creative ways that schools and districts can find the funding. I think one of the things we should remember is that there is CARES Act funding that every district should receive. Different districts are going to allocate that in different ways with their schools, but that funding does exist and is available. I think it's also important to remember that when we're talking to districts that have a high Title I population, Title I is determined by their free and reduced lunch numbers. There's funding that's available specifically for schools that are Title I. Recently, there have been funds released, again, federal funds released for districts around ESSA, which has to do with ESL students or English language students. And so I think that talking to folks about where and how that funding could be used could become very valuable, because there are funding opportunities that are out there. They just don't always happen when we typically expect. So right now, even though several districts may know a percentage of their budget, oftentimes it's not determined or finalized until a few months from now. So it makes it a little bit challenging in what they can sort of move forward with right at the time where we think that the funding is available.
And Cindy, let me add to what Cindy said, that funding continues to be discussed. Congress is now considering its fifth emergency spending bill, which does include some money for broadband connectivity. So stay tuned.
No, spot on. And for those who are interested in learning more about Whatcom and how you can actually get funding for those, most of our enterprise sales reps represent those who actually take care of the schools and the school districts. They actually have some documentation that may be helpful, not just for getting Whatcom tools, but for getting funding along those tools as well, along with other tools as well.
No, excellent, guys. Thank you so much. Well, with that, guys, I want to thank everyone for the time. Everyone, please hit F4, give a round of applause to everyone. I want to thank all the speakers. Thank you for your time today.